Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blogwana Everything. And welcome back to myself, I guess, because I've been out for a bit. It's been like maybe 3 weeks since our last upload here, and it's been for a reason, partly because life does get busy, but also because I needed a bit of a break. You know, the football season just wasn't stopping. And with the World Cup, it was just like, ramping up with every match. I was barely able to keep up as well with all those games, some of which were like at 3 a.m. and I'm needing to be at work by like 8 a.m. the next day. It's just like, it wasn't realistic. So I skipped out on some of the things I was supposed to do without notifying y'all, which that's probably not a good way to build a community. So, my apologies for that. But having said that, I did need a break and I just needed a bit of a lull in, everything that's going on. And with Barcelona having been so quiet really in that time that I've been away, since Julian Alvarez said he wanted to leave. Atleti said that he wanted the transfer. It's really been quiet from Barcelona's front, and up until really this past week, we haven't seen anything coming from Barca in the transfer window. And well, we have quite a few things now that Barcelona have gotten done. The first thing, of course, being Karim Adeyemi being signed from Borussia Dortmund for a deal worth about 22 million euros plus 7 million euros in add-ons. And I know there's a lot of people who are going to feel many different types of ways about that deal, but personally, I think we should be thinking that it's a very good deal for FC Barcelona. He's 24, 25 years old, one of the two. You're going to sign him to a 5-year contract. He had one more year on his contract at Dortmund, sure, but even if we're like in a realistic scenario, if he had like say maybe 2 or 3 more years on his contract at Dortmund, don't you think his value would be way more than 20? His value would be way more than 20 million euros. And the fact that that's what Barcelona are paying, like 22 with possible 7 in variations, it's like, that's a very good deal in my opinion. And as somebody who's generally very critical of Deco and his ability to negotiate deals, I think that in addition to the Gordon one, I guess, which I still think 8 million is too much. But considering everything that was going on around and the kind of market conditions that we have prevailing, and the fact that Bayern Munich were interested as well, 8 million for Gordon isn't that bad. Adeyemi, 20 million. He only wanted to come to Barcelona. Yes, we've been told that. And currently, we're expecting that he's going to have his medical on Wednesday. Hopefully, he has no injuries that Dortmund are trying to hide. Hopefully, Barca can, give him a green light from the medicals. And after that, of course, he's expected to sign his contract to be presented on Thursday, which that's going to be, by that time we'll actually know what the World Cup final is going to be. Just putting it out there. We'll know actually by Wednesday, because the 2 semifinals are going to be played on Tuesday and on Wednesday. But wait, this is about Adeyemi first of all, and in my regard, I think it's a good deal. I think he's going to add a lot of quality depth to Barcelona, because yes, now you can afford to say this guy can be a depth kind of signing. Basically the Ferran Torres kind of role that Ferran Torres has had, Adeyemi can definitely do that. And I think in that regard, it's a very good signing for Barca. He definitely brings a lot more dynamism to Barca, and we know that there's a bit of a cloud hanging over Rafinha and his future at FC Barcelona, whether it be because of his, injury record recently, or it be the interest from Saudi and how Barcelona wouldn't mind getting a big paycheck for him, or the rumors that we're hearing that apparently, his dad has bankrupted him, which I don't think that's really legitimate, because I haven't seen it come out from any legitimate source. But, we have seen some of those rumors circulating. So whichever one of the cases it might be regarding Rafinha and whatever uncertainty might be around him, Adeyemi at least helps you kind of cover up for that uncertainty. So should Rafinha get injured, and should Lamine Yamal need some rotation, Adeyemi is more than capable of playing on both of those positions. He can play left wing, he can play right wing, he can even play, central attacking mid if we need it, if we need it. Because we did see last season how both Fermin and Dani Olmo were out with injuries. So, that is a spot that is a bit vulnerable for Barcelona. So having a guy who can cover that spot as well as two other spots and coming in for just 20 million and is still that young, meaning he can have some resale value in the future, that's a good deal from Barcelona and a good deal from Deco. And we're told, of course, this is a transfer Flick requested, which, I'd expect nothing less of Hansi Flick and what he would demand from, his sporting director. Having said all of that, the other incoming transfer which is worth noting for Barca, aside from Julian Alvarez, we know that Barcelona are still trying to prepare the money basically for Julian Alvarez. So we heard some rumors about Barca basically taking an advance of their TV money, which, they've done this in the past and they're doing it again. We did it in 2022 when we bought, Lewandowski, Koundé, Rafinha, and now it seems we'll be doing it again. But this time it'll be for the purpose, I think, of getting Julian Alvarez, who finally opened his goal-scoring account at the World Cup with one hell of a golazo, one that's going to definitely have Barca thinking, yeah, let's definitely fork out this money. Let's sit down and discuss with Atleti. We've been notified as well that Barcelona and Atleti will be sitting down for probably something like a fresh round of negotiations. I'm guessing Atleti haven't accepted that 100 million euro bid Barcelona gave them, but I think they need to give the official communication. They haven't done that so far, so that's probably one thing they'll do in that sit down with Barca, and I guess they're probably going to start thrashing out the general details, of a deal, what could be acceptable for them. We are also told that Atletico Madrid could be interested in a Barcelona player whom we'll be talking about very soon when we're looking at outgoings, because he is a player who a lot of Kool-Aids have been saying, hey, can we ship this guy? And it looks like that might actually be the case, but the only question now is where he might wind up, although there is some very heavy evidence that he might be headed to France. But before we get to him, let's also talk lastly about a young winger that Barcelona have signed. And again, this is a player who I don't know that much about. I just literally had to Google him, as soon as I saw the here we go from none other than Mr. Fabrizio Romano himself. And it is basically a kid from Belgium who plays for Club Brugge, who goes by the name of, hold on a second here, I don't want to mispronounce this, and it's likely for me to mispronounce it though, Jesse Bisiwu. And he is an 18-year-old left winger coming from Belgium, of course, born and bred in Belgium. I think he had something like he has West African parents. I've forgotten the country. Okay, my apologies. But he's a young, exciting winger. Looks like something like a 9 million euros that's going to be paid by Barcelona for him. And for now, I think he's going to go into Barca Athletic. So we'll see how all of that goes. We can add him, of course, to the other youngster who Barcelona signed, we were talking about last time, the winger from Ecuador. So we'll see how this goes, with Jesse Bisiwu, if he is able to integrate better than, I think, was he Caicedo? Oh my goodness, I forget his name. My apologies, I'll put the correct name. But Jesse Bisiwu is a Ghanaian by descent, but born and raised in Belgium, and he's one of those youngsters Barca are going to look to sort of integrate into their team. Okay, so that's the news in as far as incoming transfers are concerned. Okay, we're getting in Adeyemi, we're looking to start negotiations for Alvarez, and we're also getting Bisiwu to add to, Anthony Gordon, who has already been signed. So now we talk about some of the outgoings. And the player who we've been talking about, who I had said, of course, earlier on, he looks like he could be headed to France. That player is none other than Mr. Ferran Torres, who honestly has been having a torrid time at the World Cup. You know, I feel for the guy. You know, it's not been easy for him. I think he's only had like one goal contribution, which just so happened to be the assist that knocked out Portugal from the World Cup. So, you know, there's that. But he has also, I guess, finally sat down and had talks with teams like Paris Saint-Germain, who apparently are very interested in getting him, which I guess that makes sense since PSG did sell Gonzalo Ramos, and they might be looking for another body to fill that number 9 role, who, you know, somebody who they can use coming off the bench, kind of like what he's already doing for Barca. And I mean, it's an attractive deal. He's got Luis Enrique there. We all know how well they got along. Ferran Torres and Luis Enrique, that is. And aside from that, of course, there's the fact that PSG are the current Champions League, you know, holders, the current reigning champions of Europe. So, you know, there's a lot of motivation in as far as playing for them is concerned. And I mean, he's got some familiar faces who run into over there as well, like Ousmane Dembele, like Dro Fernandez, you know, on top of Luis Enrique. But aside from PSG and Luis Enrique, there's also some interest in Ferran Torres from Atletico de Madrid, and in particular because of Matteo Alemany. Now, we remember Matteo Alemany. He's basically the guy who signed Ferran Torres for Barcelona, you know, after Xavi asked for him. He's the guy who made the deal happen, and he's interested in getting him here as well. And who knows, maybe that could be part of the Julian Alvarez framework. But the last I do remember, though, Ferran Torres was not interested in playing for Atletico de Madrid. So that could be the big obstacle there. And I mean, honestly, choosing between Paris and Madrid, if you ask me, I'd go with Paris as well. I'd go to Paris as well. You know, I wouldn't choose Paris. I wouldn't choose Madrid over Paris. You know, definitely going with Paris. And that looks like that's what Ferran Torres is set to do. So I don't know, guys. You let me know what you think. And as far as transfers, that's basically that. So we can talk a bit about the World Cup. You know, it's happening right now. We've got quite a few Barcelona players, you know, who are going to be involved in it. I mean, obviously, there's the Spanish contingent, which is about, you know, 6 or 7 dudes. And then, of course, you've got the English contingent, who's just, you know, Anthony Gordon, who has managed to get now 3 assists in his last 3 games for England. And, of course, you've got Jules Koundé lining up with the French team. And honestly speaking, right now, I could say maybe the best performing Barcelona player at the moment at the World Cup is Pau Cubarsi, which is something that not many people saw coming. But he's really kind of grown into and through this tournament. Each match, he kind of looks a bit more reassured than he did before. Although I will admit, against Belgium, he probably had his sternest test, you know, with both Lukaku and De Ketelaere, who he was playing against. Is it De Ketelaere or De Ketelaere? I don't know which one it is, but I'll just call him CDK for future reference. So he did have a very tough test in that match, that is Cubarsi, but I think he came through it with flying colors. I know there's a lot of people who, you know, when they hear a center back, they want to see a dude who's like 6'3", 6'4", you know, it's like built like a brick house and can run and sprint as fast as, you know, the fastest athletes out there. And because of that, you know, that's who people want. You know what I'm saying? Not so much a guy like Cubarsi, who I think Cubarsi is just about 6 foot, if not 5'11", right? Let me just, give me a second here. Cubarsi. Height in feet. Yeah, he's bang on 6 foot flat. And I mean, considering the fact that he's just 19 years old, he could still probably put on an inch or two. Maybe he could be like 6'2" by the time he's done growing, 6'1", somewhere there. But, you know, he is, in my opinion, dominating a bit more than people are willing to recognize. Why am I saying that? Because when you hear dominating and the center back, people tend to usually think of, somebody who's being physically imposing. But we all know that's not Cubarsi's game. I mean, sure, he's not weak, you're not going to just like throw him around anyhow. He can, what's that word, hold his own in a physical contest, but he's not somebody who you're going to refer to as being physically dominant, right? He's not like your Ronald Araujo's, your William Saliba's. He's not that kind of a player. But despite that, he is still, like I said, able to dominate, and he does it using, the thing in between his ears, his brain. And he's been showing a lot of intelligence in his play. And I mean, playing alongside Joan. I almost say playing alongside Joan Laporte. Playing alongside Aymeric Laporte. He has been able to really kind of rediscover some of the form that we saw him with when he was playing next to Inigo Martinez. Now, Laporte isn't as dominant physically as an Inigo Martinez is, but he's at least been able to give the kind of guidance that Cubarsi needs, and he's been the kind of reference point that Cubarsi, I think, prefers to play with, which maybe says something about how Barcelona should be thinking of, setting up their defense. Maybe they should just look for a more experienced centre back to play alongside Cubarsi, who can act as that reference point for him, rather than going for another young centre back. Just putting it out there for Barcelona to think about. But yeah, I've been impressed by what I've seen from Pau Cubarsi during this World Cup, and it's not really an exaggeration to say that as things stand, Cubarsi is probably a shoo-in for Young Player of the Tournament. I mean, there are not many young players still left in the tournament that have played as much football in the tournament as he has, or that are, just looking as good, as strong, as confident on the ball as he is. So, yes, let's keep that in mind in as far as Pau Cubarsi is concerned. And, of course, we can also give an honorable mention here to, like I said earlier, Anthony Gordon, who has over the past few matches now for England been looking a bit more like what you'd want to see. He's now he's looking a bit more like the 80 million euro guy that you signed, like the guy who can, put the opposition fullback under pressure and who can create from out wide. So I have to say, in this case, good job from him as well. But aside from that, I don't really know if I could say there's anybody else who's been performing at the level that I would say I expect from them, as far as the Barca players are concerned, or above that level. And of course, a lot of criticism in that seems to be going to Lamine, but in my opinion, talking about an 18-year-old coming into a tournament, you can only expect so much. He was able to, bring Spain to life against Saudi Arabia, and beyond that, I would say even against Belgium, he did have a good game. If it's just, there was a tree in between the sticks, saving every one of his shots. Thibaut Courtois had a pretty good game. And it wasn't until Courtois went off that Spain actually managed to score a second. And, again, that second came largely thanks to Pau Cubarsi, who, just had the bravery to take the shot, which led to the rebound that Merino scored. And that is basically that for me. Honestly, I don't really have that much else to add without just starting to ramble. But do let me know your thoughts on everything, whether it's the Adeyemi signing, the potential Ferran Torres, departure, or the signing of Bisiwu as well, and some of the other signings Barca are trying to get over the line, like Julian Alvarez. And thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day, and Forza Barca.